Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we've been following for you today. At the White House today, President Biden met with state governors, encouraging them to make good use of the billions in federal aid they received this past year. Hours later, he welcomed Qatar's leader to discuss a wide range of issues. We have the details coming up. And critical race theory may have been the deciding factor in the race for governor in Virginia just a few months ago. Will this Marxist ideology play a key role in the 2022 midterms and beyond? We have someone here to discuss. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has expressed support for one of President Biden's picks for the Supreme Court. We have the details. President Biden is balancing challenges at home and abroad. Today at the White House, he held two important meetings, one with state governors encouraging them to make good use of the billions of federal aid given to the states over this past year. Biden later met with the leader of Qatar. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the latest.
President Biden welcomed governors to the White House with the guidebook to help them tap into the infrastructure funding, urging them to make good use of the federal money sent to the states, while admitting that the list of challenges the country faces is piling high.
Well, there's a lot of challenges out there that we're not even talking to directly today. There's so many, but the surge of gun violence since the start of this pandemic. I made it clear we should use these funds to combat violent crime as well.
The president also told governors there's no reason why we can't keep our schools open. This is one area of common ground among the leaders. We heard from Republican Governor Hutchinson after the meeting.
We need to move away from the pandemic, and we asked the president to help give us clear guidelines on how we can return to a greater state of normality.
Shortly after the governors left the White House, Biden welcomed another guest, Qatar's ruler. Qatar now represents America's interest in Afghanistan after the Biden administration withdrew troops and closed the doors to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul.
And this past year, our partnership with Qatar has been central to many of our most vital interests.
We managed to evacuate tens of thousands of people of Afghanistan.
And that discussion will continue this week. Qatar's leader will also meet with the Pentagon, the Department of Homeland Security, and Congress. And another urgent topic, Russia.
Today, in the United Nations, we've laid out the full nature of Russia's threat to Ukraine's sovereignty and the territorial integrity.
So how is Qatar relevant to this effort? The country is one of the world's largest gas producers, and the U.S. is asking them to ramp up supply to help protect Europe from a gas shortage if Russia moves forward with an invasion. But ramping up gas supply will be tough for Qatar because the country is already producing at full capacity, fulfilling contracts with Asia, and there's no excess supply. And to reflect the importance of the relationship between the two countries, President Biden today announced he will designate Qatar as a major non-NATO ally, a designation Biden says is long overdue. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Republican lawmakers have ramped up filing bills banning critical race theory across the country. State lawmakers have filed at least another 56 bills this month regulating how race and sexuality is being taught in schools. This is in addition to bills already filed in 2021, which makes a total of 122 bills across 33 states. 10 have already become law in 9 states. One such bill is Indiana's House Bill 1361, which forbids promotion of concepts such as the idea that one is privileged because of their race or gender, or that anyone, quote, bears the responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Some of the bills also support transparency of lesson plans for parents and the public. Critical race theory has been a contentious issue in communities throughout the country. Remote learning resulting from the lockdowns has offered parents a bird's-eye view into the curriculum being taught in their children's schools. Here to discuss critical race theory and the political implications of supporting this ideology, we have Executive Director of American Principles Project, Terry Schilling. Terry Schilling, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Excited to be here.
Now, Terry, the issue of critical race theory was a major issue in the Virginia race for governor. Why do you think that was?
Well, a few things, right? Parents are really concerned about what their kids are learning in school, and they definitely don't like the tenets of what critical race theory is, which is that the color of your skin determines the content of your character. And secondly, and this is really what is the reason why number one is so important and why it matters, is that Americans, since the Civil Rights Act passed, we've internalized that belief that the color of your skin should not matter. In terms of the direction your life heads and the way you're treated. And critical race theory goes against all of that. So it's anti-parent, it's anti-family, but most of all, it's anti-American and anti-human.
Now, Terry, how long have these ideologies been percolating in schools throughout the country? Critical race theory got its real start in academia, in the higher levels, university systems and colleges. But we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years that this has started to trickle into our elementary and middle and high schools. So this has really taken a foothold first in academia over the last 50, 60 years, these radical race concepts. And now it's starting to trickle down into our elementary schools. So this is a big beast, but I think we can overcome it simply because the vast majority of Americans, especially parents and families, are totally opposed to the ideology and frankly, the agenda that these guys are pushing. Now, Terry, I think that because of the pandemic with the remote learning, it's actually shed light to a lot of parents who are actually now seeing the curriculum, seeing what their kids are being taught. And now, what are you seeing when these parents actually see these things and are speaking out at school board meetings and in various places?
Well, Stephen, that's a great question. So that was the 2 years where they were doing distance learning and the education content really came into my own home was when we decided to pull the plug. And, every parent has a different reason for why they're upset at the school system. Some think it's because they're teaching our kids to be racist. Others because they're pushing anti-American curriculum. For me and my wife, we were really upset at the lack of really any academic content whatsoever. There's almost no academic rigor in the best school system in the country, our home school system, Fairfax County. And so I think a lot of parents are upset and worried about what's going on in their own systems. It's one thing to be indoctrinating kids and teaching them bad things. It's a totally other thing to be not teaching them any of the basics like reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of the, science and everything else. So, what's happening is these parents are seeing this. They're pulling their kids out of school. We've seen a huge migration away from public schools over the past 2 years, but even more so, and this is more important for the future of the country, these parents are speaking out at school board meetings and they're holding their school board elected officials accountable. So hopefully we can get these guys out of office, out of power, and replace them with good, smart, wise people that actually know what to do for our kids.
Now, Terry, we saw the Virginia governor race take a pretty big swing in the polls after Terry McAuliffe at one of the debates just weeks before the actual election said that parents really should not have any say in the children's curriculum. What do you see? Do you see that there could be political implications for Democrats moving forward on this issue?
No, another great question, Stephen. So, yeah, I think the idea that Democrats are now saying the quiet part out loud, which is that parents shouldn't be telling schools what to teach, I think that's going to have very big and broad political implications. And what I mean by that is you're going to have a Tea Party style and Tea Party sized wave coming into these midterm elections. Parents are outraged, and it's not just Republican parents, it's moderate and Democratic parents who also want to have a say in their kids' education. So I think what you're going to have is a family-sized, family-style Tea Party coming into 2022 where you're taking back school boards, you're taking back state legislatures, and you're taking back Congress in reaction to Democrats exposing themselves for wanting to get parents out of the way when it comes to indoctrinating our kids and instilling values into them that are just blatantly anti-American and anti-human.
Terry Schilling, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Senator Lindsey Graham praised U.S. District Judge Michelle Childs on Sunday, saying he can't think of a better person for President Biden to consider to the Supreme Court to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. In an interview with Face the Nation, Senator Graham from South Carolina praised Childs, saying she is highly qualified and has wide support in our state. Childs sits on the federal district court in South Carolina. The White House has confirmed that Childs is a potential nominee under consideration to fill the vacancy. She is also believed to be one of the 3 frontrunners now. Biden has pledged to choose a black woman for the position, which he said is long overdue. U.S. Senator John Boozman's campaign said today he raised more than $1 million for his re-election bid in the final months of last year. Boozman was first elected to the Senate in 2010 and won re-election in 2016. The 2-term Republican senator reported having $3.5 million on hand for his re-election campaign and spending more than $400,000 in the final 3 months of last year. Boozman said in a statement released by his campaign, quote, "I look forward to 2022 and earning the support of Arkansans once again to deliver proven conservative results." He faces challenges from several Republicans in May's primary, including former NFL player Jake Bequette, former President Donald Trump, Senator Tom Cotton, and former White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders have all endorsed Boozman. Tensions over Ukraine are high. U.S. and Russian diplomats clash over the Ukraine crisis at a high-stakes UN meeting today. And NBA star Enes Kanter Freedom is calling the Beijing Olympics the medal of shame. He reminds those athletes about the Chinese Communist Party's human rights abuses and hopes that they can all take a stand for what is right. Tens of millions of Americans have received free COVID test kits in the mail due to a White House initiative. But some lawmakers were upset when they found out where the tests were made. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capital Report. And tensions are at an all-time high over Ukraine. The UN Security Council met today to get answers from Russia. The U.S. called this meeting to discuss the Ukraine situation, despite Russia and China objecting.
The test of Russia's good faith in the coming days and weeks is whether they will come to that table and stay at that table until we reach an understanding. If they refuse to do so, the world will know why and who is responsible.
Russia denies its plans to launch an attack, accusing the West of stirring up tensions.
You are almost calling for this. You want it to happen.
Russia made a list of demands to NATO.
The non-inclusion exception of Ukraine to NATO, the non-deployment in its territory of foreign troops.
President Biden on Friday said the U.S. will soon send troops to Eastern European countries, but none to Ukraine. The Pentagon has placed about 8,500 troops on standby. On Capitol Hill, Democrat and Republican senators are pushing forward a deal on Russian sanctions.
And we are committed jointly in a bipartisan way to defend Ukraine and to send Putin a message. It'll be bloody and consequential.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russia's top diplomat will likely speak again this week in an attempt to defuse the crisis. A group of Republican lawmakers today called on the CDC to provide scientific evidence for the agency's COVID policies for children. They said the CDC's guidelines are jeopardizing an entire generation. House Republican Whip Steve Scalise and 5 other Republican lawmakers wrote a letter on Monday to the CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. They said, quote, "The CDC has consistently failed to consider the crushing impact its COVID-19 policies have had on our nation's children." In the letter, the lawmakers outline how the CDC's quarantine and school reopening guidance poses risks to children's health and education. They also pointed out that the CDC's masking policy for children harms their speech and social development. The lawmakers said America's children are paying and will continue to pay the price for the CDC's decisions for years to come. They're asking Walensky to schedule a staff briefing on all related issues by February 7th. Millions of Americans have received free made-in-China COVID-19 test kits thanks to a White House initiative. According to the White House, tens of millions of at-home test kits have been shipped. Earlier this month, China-based Anden Health says it's signed a $1.2 billion contract with the United States Army. Andon's California-based subsidiary, iHealth Labs, is doing the distribution. Republican lawmakers complained earlier this month when they received masks that were made in China. In a letter to Speaker Pelosi, Virginia Congressman Rob Whitman said it's imperative to break U.S. dependence on foreign medical supply chains. Just 4 days before the Beijing Winter Olympics are set to begin, NBA star Enes Kanter Freedom joined Congressman Michael McCaul by calling out the Chinese Communist Party for their horrific human rights abuses. He also said that all athletes should stand up when it comes to human rights atrocities.
The CCP is successfully committing some of the most horrific crimes against humanity of our time. They are an enemy of freedom and democracy.
Congressman McCaul said the Olympics are supposed to be the most prestigious sporting event in the world, but the International Olympic Committee has stained their reputation by turning a blind eye to these atrocities committed by the CCP.
The IOC allowing what I'm calling the genocide games to go forward is a stain on the Olympics. And I'm deeply disturbed that these games will take place in the shadow of concentration camps.
Kanter Freedom agrees with Congressman McCaul for calling the Beijing Winter Olympics the genocide games.
He said the genocide games, and I call it the medal of shame. All the gold medals in the world that you can win is not more important than your morals, your principles, and your values. I feel like all the athletes need to stand up for something.
Freedom says the athletes need to educate themselves and know where they are going.
Listen, look what they did to their own tennis player, Peng Shuai, right? Are we really going to trust with CCP with our own players? Right? If your daughter, if your sister, if your wife was on those concentration camps in Xinjiang, would you still go to those games?
Freedom has been very outspoken in his criticism of human rights abuses taking place in China. Recently, he responded to a request to visit China from former NBA star Yao Ming on social media, saying he would accept a visit to China as long as he gets to see the, quote, real China, rather than the propaganda. Congressman McCaul and other Republican lawmakers sent a letter to Secretary Blinken last week, urging the State Department to inform American athletes the full breadth of the CCP's atrocities and malign actions before competing, and to protect the athletes from any measures the CCP might take to threaten or silence the athletes. Two Democratic co-chairs of the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China told U.S. Olympic officials that there must be a plan to protect athletes who are critical of human rights abuses taking place in China. Senator Jeff Merkley and Congressman James McGovern sent them a letter after a Chinese official told reporters that any behaviors against Chinese law and regulations would be subject to punishment. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken posted a Lunar New Year greeting to those in the United States and around the world celebrating the holiday. His statement on the State Department website welcomes all nations and people to the United States in an effort to build a better world for future generations. It also said, quote, "May the year of the tiger bring opportunity, success, and good health to all." That's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for joining us. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance, and we'll see you again tomorrow.